on this computer. There we go. Okay, so as I mentioned to Alan a moment ago, I know this about his son David, that it's his son David's bar mitzvah anniversary this coming Shabbat. It's a double portion BeHar-BeChukotai. It's possible when David became bar mitzvah, how many years ago? 24 years ago, something like that. That it was just BeChukotai that Shabbat. And I know that it was the anniversary of his bar mitzvah because of his wedding a couple of summers ago. I just happened to mention to him and his bride Adi that I still have the speech from his bar mitzvah portion, so I was able to scan it and send it on to him. Anyway, welcome Elizabeth. I have everybody on mute and I'm recording. So the portion this week is BeHar-BeChukotai. There are more portions in the Torah than there are weeks of the year. And so therefore, some portions have to be doubled in order to get through the entire Torah in time, because we have to finish by Simchat Torah and start on Simchat Torah again. So the rabbis came up with a system of which portions are eligible to be doubled, and it's mainly based on the size of the portion itself so that you don't get into a very cumbersome, lengthy Torah portion. Like, for example, in the book of Numbers, the portion Naso happens to be the longest Torah portion of any Torah portion in the Torah. So there's no way that Naso is going to be doubled with any other portion. Why inflict more suffering on the community? And that's actually a concept, tircha de tzibura, the suffering to the community. So you don't want to, like, for example, you wouldn't want to have someone leading the service who is tone deaf. And if the point of the service is to sing well and to inspire other people to sing, you don't want somebody tone deaf. That would be tircha de tzibura, suffering of the community, or extra trouble for the community. So the portions that are eligible to be doubled are those that are shorter, and it also relates to the calendar as well. Because we have to by Shavuot, usually the portion Bamidbar, the first portion in the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, is read on the Shabbat before the holiday of Shavuot. So we want to get to these landmarks in time, and so if it's not a leap year, and a leap year in a Jewish calendar means you add an extra month to the calendar, an extra Adar. So since it's not a leap year, that means that most likely most of the portions that are eligible to be doubled will be doubled. So with that, these are the last two portions. Let me just admit Marlene Sandberg here. These two portions mark the end of the book of Leviticus. And so let me just make sure that, yes, good. Marlene is, hi Marlene, and just want to make sure you're muted. Everybody's muted. These two, so, we began the virus and our social distancing and closing of the synagogue right around the end of the book of Exodus. So it is quite sad that we've gone through an entire book of the Torah in social distancing and not being able to, we said chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek, be strong, let us strengthen one another, as we concluded the book of Exodus. And then I remember saying, hoping that we were going to be back together soon. Well, this Shabbat, we're going to say chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek again. Be strong, let us strengthen one another, stay safe, stay healthy, as we continue to do our best Jewishly and study Torah the best we can in social isolation. So it's it's quite the it's not a positive milestone that we're reaching this Shabbat, that we're concluding a book in isolation. So the portion Behar
Jonah?
mainly focuses, again, if you have a, yes, Barry.
Yeah, just a quick question. You said that how many portions actually are doubled? And since the scrolls were written without breaks, it was the rabbis who made the breaks. Why didn't they just simply lengthen the shorter portions so they didn't have to double up? What was the reason for that?
Well, so mainly the issue about doubling up is because of the nature of the Jewish calendar. There isn't a set amount of weeks in a Jewish year. So there are 54 Torah portions. So in a secular calendar, there are 52 weeks. So already that way, there are more portions than there are weeks of the year. But in a Jewish year, there could be are there more than, so in any particular year, most likely there will be at least one double portioned Shabbat. So there are rules for this, and I'm not up on those rules. In other words, the rabbis who created the calendar and set the rules for the calendar, before there was such a thing as HebCal, which is a website that you can go to type in any date and know what the Jewish date is and what the portion for that Shabbat is going to be, and you could put in the date 1,000 years from now, and it will tell you what the year is, what the date on the calendar is. So there are certain rules on how the calendar is set up. In other words, Yom Kippur can never be on a Friday or a Sunday. So because of that, other holidays have to fall at the right time to ensure that Yom Kippur is never on a Friday or a Sunday. And then that also determines when Rosh Chodesh will be, because the Jewish month itself, the time it takes the moon to orbit the earth is 29 and a half days. So it's not 29 days, it's 29 and a half days. So some months are 29 days and some months are 30 days. And there's a rule as to which months will have a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. So when it's a 30th day of the month, that's Rosh Chodesh. And then the first day of the month is Rosh Chodesh. So sometimes there's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. So, and then there's the 50 days between Pesach and Shavuot, which Rosh Chodesh are both Rosh Chodesh ER and Rosh Chodesh Sivan that comes during the 50 days. Aren't they added to the, that's part of the system too. So, so you have to figure out first that year when Yom Kippur is going to be. So all of it has now become part of a mathematical formula. And Jan, no, a Jewish leap year is only adding a month. It's never just adding a day. It's only in the secular calendar that you do that. It's almost as complicated as setting out an NFL or MLB schedule. Yes, that is true, and that you have to do every year. But the calendar has been set up already, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. So the rabbis back in the time of the Talmud set up the system. And they did the system with the understanding that already they had the system when the temple was standing in Jerusalem. The rabbis set up as an important concept that there had to be witnesses to come to Jerusalem to testify that they saw the new moon. And that, even though they knew the astronomical, mathematical formula and they knew when the new moon was going to be. They were sophisticated enough already 2,000 years ago to know that. They maintained the old-fashioned with human testimony to seeing the new moon in the sky. And doing that meant a last-minute call in the troops to set out the signal fires to let the land of Israel know that the new moon has been seen, and that will then determine, let's say it's the new month of Nisan, that would determine when Passover would be observed. So you'd have to wait. If you were a Jewish homemaker, you'd have to wait until the signal fire got lit. So 2 weeks before, in order to know when exactly Passover was going to be, so that you could send out your invitation for people to come to your house for Seder, right? You wouldn't know exactly when Passover would be based on the old way of announcing the new month. So in the time of the Talmud, when the temple was destroyed, there arose a conflict between the Jewish community of Babylonia and the Jewish community of the land of Israel as to who is going to be in charge of making decisions for the entire Jewish community. And the rabbis of Babylonia said and admitted that the rabbis of the land of Israel are more important and on a higher level of authority than rabbis in Babylonia, because rabbis in the land of Israel are called Rabbi, and rabbis in Babylonia are called Rav. So there's a little bit more of an honorific to being ordained in the land of Israel than in Babylonia. But finally, by the end of the Talmudic period, even the rabbis in the land of Israel recognized the Babylonian community is so much stronger that we have to give them the power and even to set the calendar. So setting the calendar was the ultimate power in the community. And by the year 500 CE, so 1,500 years ago, the power shifted to Babylonia to let them determine the calendar. And since then, it's a 19-year cycle, the Jewish calendar is. So it used to be that whatever your Hebrew birthday would match your English, it would match the English day once every 19 years. But since the millennium, that changed a little bit, I think. So so in other words, I'm February 20th, 1962. I don't remember my Hebrew birthday offhand, and I don't even know what day of the week February 20th was. But when I turned 19, then my Hebrew day and my English day, those birthdays would have been the exact same day. And that only happens once every 19 years in the cycle when the general calendar jives with the Jewish calendar. Okay, so all of that was a lengthy exposition as to why we have a double portion. And so that's what I like about Torah study, that we go off on a tangent that I don't even think is going to be a tangent. And my list of notes in front of me that gets thrown out the window as to what I think we're going to cover today. So the portion BeHar mainly focuses on a lesson in agrarian economy, and mainly this bizarre idea that the Jewish community, or be more technical, the Israelite community, because it's not Jewish until 2,000 years ago with the rise of the rabbis. Before that, what we learn about from the Torah is about the Israelite people and their focus on offerings to the Mishkan and later to the temple in Jerusalem. So a Torah-centered, sacrificial, system-centered religion is the Israelite religion. It becomes Judaism when the rabbis created the synagogue and created prayers and created other rituals that we can do independent of the temple. That became Jewish 2,000 years ago. So the Israelite religion, as presented here in the Torah in this portion, BeHar, tells us that that Israelite society should be both capitalistic and communist in the way it functions. It's capitalist in understanding that some farmers are going to be more productive with their produce. In other words, they're going to produce more on their land than their neighbor, or literally their neighbor, or some other farmer in the land of Israel further away. That they're going to make more money than and be able to supply not just for their family, but make money to sell to the markets and whatnot than other people will. And that's totally fine for Israelite society. It's okay to make more money than somebody else. But at the same time, there's a clear understanding that every tribe in the land of Israel and every family within that tribe has a particular land holding. So for example, the Laman tribe, let's say I'm from the tribe of Issachar, the Laman tribe, the Laman family of the tribe of Issachar has its particular plot of land that it's allowed to keep, and not just allowed, it's supposed to keep in perpetuity, that forever the Laman family of the tribe of Issachar is forever connected to that parcel of land in the land of Israel. The book of Numbers tells us that specifically, that God commanded Moses to kind of randomly in a lottery apportion the land of Israel to the 12 tribes. The tribe of Levi and the Kohanim are a subset of the tribe of Levi, don't get a landholding. They get towns that are set aside for them throughout the land of Israel. But all the other tribes have a specific area of the land of Israel. And if you look in the back of the Eitz Chaim Chumash, for example, in the maps on the back of the Chumash, you'll see on the third map, I'm not sure you can read it too well, but trust me, on this map are listed the tribes and where they're supposed to be in the land of Israel. That's traditionally where they are thought to have been. So what God is saying in this portion, BeHar, is that the land of Israel is holy to the people of Israel. So holy that each tribe of the land of Israel, of the people of Israel, has their area that is theirs and supposed to keep holy. Every family in that tribe has its land holding that it will pass down from one generation to the next. But the problem with that is, just a second, Diane, let me just finish this thought. The problem with that happens if your farm on your land in the land of Israel is not successful, and you have to mortgage your land in order to survive. Well, the Torah portion this week teaches us the mortgage is at the most a 50-year mortgage. That's at the most it can be, because every 7 years you have to let your land lie fallow. 7 cycles of 7 years, that's 49 years. The 49th year is a sabbatical year, letting the land lie fallow. You're not supposed to work the land. Let it have a Shabbat, a year of rest, like people have a day of rest. And the 50th year is a Jubilee year, and that year, the land has to revert to its original owner. So if you take out a mortgage in the second year of the 50-year cycle, well, that's a pretty good mortgage, and you should get a low interest rate on that, because the person you're mortgaging the land to, there were no banks, is going to be able to get a lot of money back from that. But if you're in desperate need of a mortgage in the 48th year of the 50-year cycle, whoa, those interest rates are going to be pretty high, because everybody knows the land is going to become yours again, and it goes back to the original family in that 50th year. And that's why I'm saying kind of a communist kind of style here. There is no idea There is no concept for the Torah of ownership of land. We only rent the land, and we only live on the land that is set aside for us by God. So, Diane, wait, let me unmute you. Go ahead.
How do you find out which of the 12 tribes you were from?
So that's a good question. And that we will only, and I'm not laughing this off by saying this, we will only know when the Messiah comes. And again, I'm not laughing that off. That's a powerful concept for the rabbis, because all Jews today are either, if you're a Levi or a Kohen, you're from the tribe of Levi. So that's pretty clear. And genetic analysis has been done on people who are who claim to be a Levi or Kohen, and find that there's a genetic marker that goes back theoretically to the time of Moses and Aaron. So they have found that. You can Google that after this class, or even right now as we're having class, Google that genetic marker of Kohen, and you'll see articles about that. Every other Jew who is not a Kohen or a Levi, right? Because you have to be born into being a Kohen or a Levi. You cannot convert into being a Kohen or a Levi. So that's why that genetic marker seems to be pretty pure. Every other Jew is mostly of the tribe of Judah, or if you convert to Judaism, you automatically become just a regular Israelite. And so most Jews today, by the time of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, most Jews were from the tribe of Judah. And so because when 200 years before the first temple was destroyed, so in the 8th century BCE, the northern kingdom of Israel, 10 tribes of Israel, were exiled by the Assyrian Empire, and the Assyrians forced all the peoples that they conquered to assimilate into Assyrian culture. They did not allow the people that they conquered to live separately and maintain a separate society. So those 10 Israelite tribes were lost forever. So the concept of the 10 lost tribes of Israel comes from way back 2,700 years ago. The two other tribes, Benjamin and Judah, besides the tribe of Levi, were constituted in the southern kingdom of Israel. And those were the tribes that were left. And the rabbis say that when the Messiah comes, and when all Jews are supposed to be brought back to life and come back to the land of Israel, then miraculously we will know what tribe we are from, and those 10 lost tribes will be brought back as well. So that's the idea. So we don't know for sure what tribe we're from, and all of this that we're reading in this week's Torah portion is all theoretical. We really don't know if that system of the Jubilee year actually was carried out, and if it was, how long it was carried out for. The commentary points out that that documents were found from ancient Israel, like deeds of sale, that say this property was mortgaged in the blank year of the 50-year cycle. Yes, Barry.
12 tribes of Israel, Benjamin and Judah are 2, and the Levites are the 3rd.
All right.
How
Yes.
do we get 12 when it totals 13?
Yeah.
I've always wondered that. I'm sorry.
Right.
Okay.
That's a good question too. So yeah, because there's Ephraim and Manasseh in there too, and not Joseph. So the how we get to the, so I can't answer that. So you you got me on the spot there, and it sounds like there are 13 tribes. I think there are it's 12 tribes based on those that are actual have land holdings. It's 13 if you include Levi, but it's 12. So it's 12 with land holding. That's because you have Ephraim and Manasseh, who are Joseph's children. If you don't have Ephraim and Manasseh and have Joseph instead, then you have the 12 sons of Jacob. Okay, so if you look at the 12 sons of Jacob, you don't have Ephraim and Manasseh. Those are Jacob's two of Jacob's grandsons. So with Joseph and Levi included, you have 12 sons. The 12 tribes would be the actual land holdings. So instead of Joseph, you have Ephraim and Manasseh, and Levi doesn't have a land holding. So they just have towns that they live in, and they live and work around the temple, in the Mishkan first, and then around the temple. So the 12 tribes is based on the land holding. The 12 sons are based on the sons. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, so we do know, based on the commentary that's below the line, points out that there are deeds of sale that have been recorded, that have been found by archaeologists of Israelites recording this deed based on, this is the 3rd year in the sabbatical cycle, or the 15th year in the Jubilee cycle. So it was maintained to some degree. There's also a sense that Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, prophesied that, and this is, yes. So if you look in the Eitz Chaim on page 739, so the portion BeHar is Leviticus chapter 25. So I can't tell you, if you don't have the Eitz Chaim, what page that is, but look for the portion BeHar, or look for Leviticus chapter 25. But in the Eitz Chaim, I'm on page 739, the second page of the portion. And just on that left-hand side says what I'm about to say. The prophet Jeremiah predicted 70 years of exile in Babylonia to make up for the 70 sabbatical years the people neglected during their approximately 500 years of living in the land of Israel. So Jeremiah was the prophet who lived at the time of the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem and the exile to Babylonia. Excuse me. That happened in the year 586 BCE. If you think that Moses was about 1200 BCE, then that's what we're getting to with the approximately 500 years of living in the land of Israel. We don't know exactly when Moses was. We don't know exactly when Joshua lived and started bringing the people into Israel, and when the judges started to rule. We think King David was around the year 1000. We think that because of the celebration of Jerusalem 20 years ago for its 3,000 years of the city of David. So it's just, most scholars think he's around the year 1000, but we don't know absolutely for sure. So it's an approximation of 500 years of living in the land of Israel. And Jeremiah was telling the people and preparing them for destruction, that telling the people that it's too late to repent of your sins, prepare to be conquered by the Babylonians, prepare to go into exile. And so he predicted 70 years of exile, which turned out to be almost exact, because when Persia defeated Babylonia, the Persian emperor Cyrus allowed the Jews in Babylonia to go back to Israel and to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. So that happened about 70 years after they were exiled. So Jeremiah predicted 70 years of exile, one for every Jubilee year that they, or the 70 one for every sabbatical year that they didn't observe. So now the sabbatical year, this is letting your land lie fallow. Can you imagine, as a farmer, without having sophisticated irrigation, without having sophisticated chemicals to preserve food in a way that, in other words, it's getting better today, but in most supermarkets, we don't get locally sourced food mostly. You get grapes that are coming from Chile. You have spinach from California. You got strawberries from California, oranges from Florida, right? So it comes a long distance. So by coming that long distance, especially if grapes are coming from Chile, that they have to be stored and packed in a way that it's going to survive the shipping and stay good for quite some time. So, which they didn't have back in the time of the Torah. So vegetables, once they were harvested, were only good for a certain amount of time. So imagine back then hearing this law that says you cannot farm your land in the seventh year, and that everything that you're going to bring in the sixth year is going to last you for 2 years, and actually 2.5 years into the first year of the next sabbatical cycle before new crops are come in. So for that seventh year, not only can't you harvest the land, you can't plant anything in that land, you can't cultivate that land. And so you have to have ultimate, true, total faith in God that the sixth year of the cycle is going to be a really, really good year that's going to provide for you and your family to last 2.5 years. And you can well imagine then that most people would not have that faith and would not bother letting their land lie fallow. No matter that it's good practice, not just to rotate your field, but to let the soil rest. It's good practice to replenish the chemicals. That's what scientists say today. It's not that this is not based on science. It's based on God's idea as taught in the Torah, that this is what we need to do. We as people need to rest every seventh day. God's holy land needs to rest every seventh year, and for us to warrant living in the land of Israel, to maintain being a holy people, then we have to follow this rule too. So it turns out that from the little bit of archaeology and sources that we have uncovered, that they did observe this to some degree, but it wasn't uniformly observed. In the land of Israel, in the state of Israel today, it's mostly not observed. But let me say what I mean by mostly. So we know the legal fiction from Passover a few weeks ago of, and I'm doing air quotes here, selling our chametz, right? Because we're not supposed to have chametz in our possession for Passover. So how do we get rid of all the food that's in our pantry or in our freezer that we know if we threw it away or we can't eat it and we haven't budgeted our menus so that we have an empty cupboard by Passover? How do we get rid of the chametz? We sell it to someone who's not obligated to observe Passover, and then we can keep it in our house, technically not under our possession. So that major legal fiction and loophole was created by the rabbis so that people can economically, feasibly observe Passover. The same is true with the land of Israel. There are the Orthodox kibbutzim in Israel, the Orthodox-owned farms in Israel, sell their land to a non-Jew in the sabbatical year. And so that these farmers can still work their land and produce the crops. And sometimes, especially in the kosher supermarkets here, and especially this is the case for wine, that you will see sometimes on the back, on the label, only written in Hebrew. So for those who know what they're reading, know that the laws of Shvi'it, the sabbatical year, have been observed. So we don't have to worry that we're drinking wine from grapes that were harvested and made into wine in the 7th year, because that's forbidden based on the Torah. And you can rest assured that your Jaffa oranges that you buy during the sabbatical year have also been produced in a way that follows the laws of the sabbatical year. Now, how did we resume the sabbatical year cycle, right? When we're out, and it only applies to the land of Israel. These laws, these agricultural laws only apply to the land of Israel. We don't have to let our land lie fallow as a Jewish farmer outside of Israel, because here the land in Olney is not holy. It's holy in a different degree, but it's not like God set aside the land of Olney as an eternal land holding for the Jewish people. So the land of Israel becomes it's sacred in that way because God said so. Outside of the land of Israel, all other land has to, and other laws of morality and ethics apply, but the agricultural laws don't apply. So once we got, in the 1880s, when Jews started to return to Israel and set up kibbutzim, then they said, whoa, so we are the ancient Israelites. A lot of them based their Zionism on this land kind of Zionism. So if you Google A.D. Gordon, he was like the main proponent of this idea of Zionism based on getting back to the land. And so they found it as their religion of Judaism was farming the land. It's not like they were observant Jews, but they were farming the land of Israel was their way of reenacting and getting back to here in the Torah what it meant to be an Israelite. The first chief rabbi of the land of Israel reestablished the sabbatical year cycle so that everybody agreed, okay, this is how we're going to count, and came up with a system of how we can sell the farm to a non-Jew, a local Arab, who would then agree not to take over the land, but to let the Jews who have those farms to continue to farm the land. So that's how we do it today. But so by doing it that way, we totally upend the vision that's in the Torah itself. We upend the idea of total trust in God, of not working the land and knowing that we're still going to have enough to sustain us. And we also upend the whole idea of the Jubilee year of returning the Jubilee year can't be done until all the tribes are back in Israel, but still it upends this idea of that we're all in this together. So this concept of it's capitalism and communism wrapped into one in a system that's presented here. I want to read the last paragraph below the line on page 738 that kind of gets to this idea. Cook. So the very last line below the line on 738, Cook is Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, who was the chief rabbi of Palestine in the 20s, mainly in the 1920s. Cook taught that the purpose of the Jubilee year was primarily spiritual, not economic. It came to restore the sense of unity that once prevailed in Israel and to restore self-respect to the person who had sunk into poverty and a sense of failure, right? So that that the sense of unity, right, that the entire community of Israel is now getting back to their original land, and their pride is restored because they're back on their original land, and it is theirs again. And also the impoverished farmer is no longer impoverished. Their debts are canceled, and they're able to start with a clean slate. So that spiritual idea of starting with a clean slate and that we're unified, that's the lesson that Abraham Isaac Cook was teaching about the Jubilee year. Even as the weekly Shabbat enables people to define themselves in non-economic terms, the sabbatical year and the Jubilee enable an entire society to put aside economic competition and the practice of defining a person's value in economic terms alone. So that's the danger of and major risk of a capitalist system, that it's the striving to be part of the 1%. And then the attitude of the 1%, of the other 99%, right? And so it's the rare 1%er who would see it as his or her value to give back, right? And so there are major philanthropists among the 1%. I'm not denying that, but would most of them say that they want to give up a lot of that? Or would most of them say, yes, tax me in a fair way so that I'm giving a lot back to America today? I don't know too many of those 1%ers. So that's the idea behind the Jubilee year, is to prevent society from declining to such a state where it's everything is for me, and I need to. We're all in this for ourselves individually, and not in it for ourselves as a community. So that's one aspect of this Jubilee year. Another fun little fact about the Jubilee year is that it says that we are when that 50th year comes, right? You shall, on page 739 in the Torah, it says, "Then you shall sound the horn loud in the 7th month on the 10th day of the month. The Day of Atonement, you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants." Well, the old translation is proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all its inhabitants thereof. And those of us from Philadelphia know that that's the line that's on the Liberty Bell. The word proclaim liberty throughout the land is on around the Liberty Bell there, and it's called the Liberty Bell because it's the word doror, and doror is translated here as release, and liberty, not freedom, not the concept of freedom, free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. That's not what doror means. It's not that kind of freedom. It's a release from bondage. It's that kind of release. And liberty can also be understood in that way, like giving a slave his liberty. So freeing the slave in that way. So you're freeing the land from whatever artificial bondage was attached to it, a mortgage or purchase was attached to it, freeing it up to be in its original state. So that's mainly what I wanted to say about the portion BeHar, which leaves us only 5 minutes to discuss the portion BeChukotai. But let me just say this about the portion BeChukotai, which begins on page 747, and it's Leviticus 26, verse 3, is the beginning of BeChukotai. The main feature of the portion BeChukotai is the brief list of blessings, rewards that the people would get if they followed in God's way, and a long list of curses that would befall the people if they neglected to follow in God's ways. And so what I wanted to say about this is, let me just see this just one second. Yeah, so let me just read the opening paragraph that's below the line, and we'll end with this. This parsha centers on a brief but eloquent promise of blessings for those who follow God's ways, and a lengthy and chilling series of curses for those who reject God's ways. The curses are known as the tochecha, or admonition or reproach. Several commentators, notably Ibn Ezra, a rabbi who lived in Spain about 900 years ago, insists that although more verses are dedicated to the tochecha, the blessings promised in the opening session outweigh it in quality. So the quality of blessings are better, even though there are less of them, than the quality of the curses, even though there are more curses. The curses are spelled out at length in the hope that they will put fear into the hearts of those who cannot be persuaded to do what is right by any other means, right? So, I mean, that's a whole argument, not just as parents. How do we get our kids to do the right thing? How do we convince our children to listen to us, right? From the time that they are young until they're adults. How do we convince our children that the values that we live up to are values worth living up to? And how do we pass that down? So what kind of system do we put into place to convince our children to follow our ways? And so how does a religious society convince people to be religious? So most people today would talk about positive reinforcement, and most educators and psychologists would say that negative reinforcement is no good, that we shouldn't be slapping our children. We shouldn't be saying negative things to them. We should only be saying positive things. So even when our child does something wrong, we're supposed to take them aside and say, little boy, little girl, what did you just do there? And talk in that positive kind of way. Those of us who were raised before the age of positive reinforcement might look down on that, or might argue with the effectiveness of just being positive, but it's a pervasive kind of method today, not just in America, but around the world. And so when we read the Torah and see this very harsh list, it kind of goes against our psyche and the way that we are raised. That what we're learning here, what God's going to punish us? Wait, punishment, that's not appropriate means of teaching someone a lesson anymore. And so, it's not necessarily, so it devolves into an idea of how we understand things happening in our lives. And for the Torah, the understanding is if anything bad happens to us in our life, it's because we deserve it, and it's as punishment for something we have done. And it doesn't matter that we can be saintly. It doesn't matter that other people can corroborate that we are saints. Anything bad that happens is because God wanted it to happen to us. And that's what we understand from the portion BeHar-BeChukotai here, that we get what we deserve, and that's a problematic theology to have. It's a problematic understanding of the world around us. But if we don't necessarily have to see it as the Jewish way of understanding why bad things happen to good people, it's the traditional way, it's the ancient way of understanding that, and there are other ways of understanding that today. So it's 11:58. Any thoughts or comments before we finish up for today? Anybody? Yes, Jan, I'll unmute you. No, you did. Okay, go ahead.
So my question back in the beginning was, I know that sometimes there's one Adar, sometimes there's Adar 1, Adar 2.
Yes, that's right.
Sometimes, isn't there also an extra day of Cheshvan or an extra day of Kislev?
Right.
And that's what I meant by the extra leap days in addition to the leap month.
Right. So that's not the extra day for a month is not technically a leap day. It's part of the system that's put into place to ensure that a holiday falls at the right time, or that Yom Kippur won't be on a Friday or a Sunday. So it's not a leap So I guess it could be considered a leap day, but I don't see it that way. It's to make up for the moon orbiting in 29.5 days, and how you're going to make up for that lost half day. So if you had months that were all 29 days, then that wouldn't be a full year of the moon orbiting the Earth. So if you have just lunar months, it's 354 days of 12 times that the moon orbits the Earth. 354 days, you're 11 days short for a regular year, a 365.25 day year. So those 11 days have to be made up unless you're a Muslim. And the Muslim calendar it just is a 354-day calendar, so their calendar moves. And it doesn't matter that Ramadan is now, and next year it'll be earlier, and the year after that earlier than that. So Ramadan moves. It can be in the summertime, it could be in the wintertime. Our holidays always have to be, Passover has to be in the spring, and Sukkot has to be in the fall. So you have to make up for those 11 days by adding an extra month every now and then. And the extra day for why Cheshvan sometimes is 30 days and sometimes 20 days is that idea of not necessarily because it's the 29.5 days, it's because that month is one that you can play with to ensure that Yom Kippur won't be on a Friday or a Sunday. Okay? So it's a whole complicated system. So I wish everybody a good rest of the day. Stay safe and healthy. Minyan tonight is at 7:30 for those who are interested, and maybe I will see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I thank you.
Bye.